Thanks, Winston. And thanks again to
Thank
all
you.
of our panelists in the last session. That was a great discussion. I really enjoyed that. Now we are very fortunate to be joined by Captain Ann Lynch, who will talk with us about resilience. In her more than 30 years as a NOAA Corps officer, Captain Lynch has sailed from Antarctica to the Arctic, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and the Gulfs of Alaska, Mexico, and Maine. She's held a variety of positions, including commanding officer of the Fisheries Research Vessel in the Northeast, Henry B. Bigelow, director of NOAA's Commission Personnel Center, and commanding officer of the Marine Operations Center, Atlantic. Currently, Captain Lynch is the director of NOAA's Homeland Security Program Office, where she works to coordinate NOAA's response to various incidents, including working closely with leadership on NOAA's response to COVID-19. Captain Lynch is a certified coach and a member of the NOAA Coaching Network, and she's also the proud mother of 2 teenage boys. Captain Lynch, we're looking forward to your presentation. You just bear with me a moment. I'm going to bring up your slides.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosemary. Thanks for that nice introduction. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, Captain Lynch, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure before we got started. Well, Rosemary's bringing that up. I want to say thank you for inviting me to this. Thank you. I listened in on a couple of the presentations, and it's all been great stuff. And I'm just so impressed with the Office of the CFO to do this for their employees, and you guys should feel very lucky. And it's nice to see when people really show how much they care about people by doing taking a time out to do this sort of wellness and providing all this support. I listened to the Ben and Jerry's presentation from Jocelyn because I couldn't resist that title, of course. And it was so funny. I feel like I should call her up and take her out for coffee because she said a lot of the same stuff that I'm going to say, just a little bit differently. But I didn't have such a catchy title. I kind of wish I had, but I do feel a little bit like I could just push the play button and go sit down somewhere and let her do it. But no, I'll give you some info on resilience. Jocelyn called it coping and surviving and thriving, but it's essentially all the same. It's being able to be resilient in your life. So next slide, please. I'm going to start with a story. I'll get to that in a second. And then I'll give you some of the definitions that are out there for what resilience means according to the psychiatrists and psychologists and textbooks. We'll talk a little bit about what makes you resilient. We'll talk about how you can tie resilience to post-traumatic growth, which is kind of an important thing in this time. And then there's another little training that I was told about that uses the acronym ARSENAL, and we'll talk about that just real briefly. I found out about it just a couple of weeks ago, so I threw it in here. And then we'll have a wrap up. So the story, and a while ago, like probably more than 10 years now, I attended a leadership course, and one of the discussion topics was resilience. The instructor stood in front of us and presented us with an orange rubber ball, an orange, and a glass Christmas ornament. And she dropped the rubber ball, and it bounced, and we watched it bounce. And then she wanted us to show us how it was unchanged, just unchanged, but it bounced back. And then she dropped the orange, and it hit with a thud, and it rolled. And so she picked that up and showed us, maybe a little bit bruised, but really unchanged also. And then she held the Christmas ornament and sort of looked at all of us, and we were like, yeah, we get the picture. Don't drop that. And it just occurred to me recently that this class was actually a communications class. And I often wondered, I remember wondering at the time that as often as I've used that story in my career, I never really understood why it was communications. But I realize it now that being resilient and having patience with yourself and with the day-to-day frustrations can in turn make you more patient as a communicator. It makes it easier to read your audience and see what they need from you and what you can provide for them, and it gives you that patience to have the open mind in a dialogue. So that's, I think, how I tied it to communications, but I know it was sort of a revelation a couple weeks ago. Overall, I have found that resiliency has been critical to my life and career. from leadership roles to support roles, from sea duty to those long days at the office when you took the last train home, through all the joyful and sad moments of life. And because it's important, I take the opportunity to talk about it whenever I can. So I really appreciate, again, being invited to come and talk to you guys about this as part of your Wellness Day. And I'll share some general definitions, some ideas on how to improve your resilience, and some suggestions for following up if you want to learn more. And this year in particular has been one that tested our resilience, and you guys have talked about that, you know, the lack of commute, the change in having to work at home, and all of those things that were definitely, you know, not to mention the worry of sickness and the loss and grief of the loved ones that we've lost. But it's important to remember too that as crazy as this year has been, you know, civil unrest, political times, scrambling for vaccines, it's important to remember that it's also been a year. So there have been a lot of personal life happenings, right? People have lost loved ones, they've gotten married, they've gotten divorced, they've had different medical diagnoses, they've moved. There's been good and bad stressors all over. And I know I've been guilty of it, that, you know, somebody will say, oh, I'm having such a hard time or something. I'm like, yeah, this is a hell of a year, right? But then you realize, wait, no, they might have an actual other problem, and it's not good to assume. I mean, it's good that we're all in the same boat with this same thing that we've been dealing with over the year, but there's also a very human element that other people may have something specific. So just keep that in mind when you're working with folks. Okay, next slide, please. We'll just start with some general definitions. This is defined as rebounding, recovering easily, the power to retain natural original form or get back to it. Adapting well in the face of adversity, rebounding from life's personal and professional setbacks to help prevent depression, manage stress, and improve your physical and psychological health. And then, you know, some people define it as the capacity to respond in healthy and productive ways when faced with adversity. Dr. Andrew Chate, who I quote here, and I give you some resources in at the end of the presentation, excuse me, he presents or teaches resilience at a couple of the Brookings leadership courses, and he's phenomenal, and he has a great book called Resilience and another book called Me-quilibrium. But I was just blown away by his course, and then I really took it to heart because I think I never had a name for what resilience was. You know, I sort of knew I had it, knew I needed it, but I didn't really understand it all. So I encourage you to look into that more if you're looking for more information. So next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about what makes you resilient. And this is great because Jocelyn gave us some great examples in her earlier conversation. I want to make sure that you guys realize you don't have to, you know, go big. There's no requirement to be an expert when you're looking for something. Hopefully most of you have an idea of what makes you resilient, but if you're actually looking to try something new and see if it helps, you know, don't feel like you have to run a marathon or be a yogi or be Ina Gardner if you want to garden. I can never say her name. If you want to cook, you can start small. You know, just like starting a habit. Maybe it's dropping a habit. Maybe you want to look at your phone less because it's stressing you out. So instead of picking up your phone, do something else, right? Think of something different. You definitely don't want to stress yourself out by finding something that makes you resilient. So don't try to you know, use baby steps. And it's just important to sort of do a lot of self-awareness. I think that's a key to find out what makes you resilient. But the other good thing is to ask other people, right? Their answer may surprise you. When this pandemic started, you know, for a while I liked it. I could be home. There's lots of piles of crap I could go through, and I would do stuff. And then a few weeks in, maybe a month or so in, my husband said, "You need to start doing something." I love puzzles. I've always loved puzzles, but to me they were a luxury. They were something to do when everything else was done. And I got a long weekend. I'm going to build a puzzle. You know, things like that. It was Christmas vacation. I'll build a puzzle. But he started medicating me with puzzles. There was puzzles come in like every week just because it was a good way to keep my brain occupied and my hands occupied while allowing my thoughts to process all of these challenges and frustrations. And think, I'm gonna go around here and ask you guys what makes you resilient. But in a lot of ways, you'll find that people will say doing things with their hands helps because it allows their brain to think about other stuff. So anybody want to volunteer? What kind of things they do that they can share with us? And I don't know, is it probably best to put it in the chat? Is that the... Nothing? Well, I put some ideas here. Gratitude is another big thing. Oh, there's one comment. All right, let's see. Drawing. Yeah, thank you, Winston. That's great. And it's fun to try things, right? It's kind of a no pressure. Knitting. It's another one of those that I see a lot of people do, and it's mindless in the sense that it keeps you occupied, but it allows you to have those thoughts in the back of your head. Quilting. Of that. Walking, yes, walking and exercise. We'll get to it when we get to that arsenal, but I think the E in there is exercise, right? That keeps you healthy and keeps you resilient. I was really pleased when I heard Jocelyn say that reaching out can help you, because that is, I've discovered that too. It's, you can feel like you do not have the strength to share with anybody else, but when you reach out, it might just help you. It's really kind of, it's like a hug, right? You give a hug, you get a hug. But it's important to fill your pitcher too. In coaching, one of my instructors has said that, what fills your pitcher so that you can then pour out yourself for others. Yep, it is hard during COVID, that's for sure, because it's hard to be close to people, and that two-dimensional world makes things really complicated, I think. Any other comments in the chat that we can talk about? I'll also note here that, again, from Dr. Chate, connection became a huge factor. He talked about there's 4 levels of connection. It's that connection to yourself, an individual, and then to a family, and then to a community, and then to their own unique brand of spirituality. So you'll find a lot when people talk about resilience that, having those mindfulness sessions and having meditation and any sort of connection to spirituality can really help boost your resilience. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. And it's really important to note that resilience is not just ignoring or repressing anything that's bothering you. You can't ignore the grief or the anger or those other emotions. You more need to embrace them, to navigate or lead through them. If you're a supervisor, lead through that frustration or anger or whatever that emotion is that you need to name. Lead through it, navigate through it, overcome, and bounce back. Yesterday, I took an emotional intelligence class because OCIO also cares about their people, and they're offering these courses for folks. And I like the idea of emotional intelligence for sure. It's right, it's right up my alley. It's very interesting. I was not in the mood, right? Because I had way too much to do, and I was just like, I can't handle this right now. But I enjoyed it a lot, and I actually learned a lot. You think, oh, I've had these classes all over and over, but I learned a lot, and I do wish it was a different week, but I enjoyed it. Gratefully, the instructor said, it's okay for everyone to have a pity party. Everyone deserves a pity party, but at some point you just got to move on. And so that moving on, that part is where resilience helps you, and it helps to make you, a better person overall, healthier, and then a better friend and spouse and partner and whatever else, and then a better leader as you're moving up, and coworker. And that self-awareness, which is part of emotional intelligence, that self-awareness is critical to finding your resilience. So, I gave this presentation a few months ago the first time, and in doing the research for that, I found these articles about post-traumatic growth. Now, post-traumatic growth is the positive psychological change that's experienced from the struggle with highly challenging life circumstances, right? That's it's this, how do you get past this crisis and what changes, and how do you change your personality or your self, your beliefs, whatever it takes to move forward and grow. And if you'll go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about an exercise that you can do that you can do individually as a journaling exercise, or you can do it in small groups if you've got a team and you wanted to reach out and do this as a team. And in the at the end there, I linked to this article, and it talked about how to be the facilitator. So, you know, one of you could be the facilitator, or you could certainly ask an outsider to be a facilitator. But essentially, you find a small group, 4 to 6 people. It's all voluntary, but you know, you want to have a pretty trusting group so you can share personal stuff, and just ask yourself these 5 questions, right? So, what was your greatest loss, and what was your greatest gain? And this is specifically about the pandemic, of course, but you can do it for any sort of shared crisis or trauma. And then the interesting part is not just to talk about it or to journal it or to tell a story about it, but what they talked about was making a narrative compass. You know, finding a 2-word short phrase that targets your future intentions and sort of sums up the story. And I love Jocelyn's talk earlier where she had those mantras, there's those couple word phrases. You know, and the last one especially that she mentioned was check in and check out, right? Both of those things are important, and they helped her maintain her resilience and be there for other folks. And they recommend in this article that you find something that's sort of alliterative to make it easier to remember. Kind and resistant, or kind and consistent, focused and fearless, loosen up and let go. Those are the examples they gave. And then, as I mentioned, Jocelyn just gave me some great ones. So celebrate, celebrate, and celebrate some more. Check in and check out. With some retrospection, when I think about it, I think mine is reach out and revive, right? Because as we talked about, I did discover that reaching out and helping others actually made me feel better. So I'd encourage all of you to think about this, and if not doing it with teams, then maybe do it as a journaling exercise. Maybe take up writing as a resilience thing, and give that a try. But if nothing else, just sort of, especially if you're having trouble with the pandemic itself, or any trauma that you've gone through, really take that time to focus and figure out how you've grown and changed, and what you can do to remember that, but use that pain to move forward. Next slide, please. And this is that arsenal that I talked about. So years ago, like 25 years ago, the NOAA Corps was actually going to go away. I don't know if you guys all know that. And I didn't understand Rosemary very clearly, but it sounded like she said 3 years in the NOAA Corps, but really there's been 30 years in the NOAA Corps. I joined when I was like 14. So no, seriously. So in the mid-90s, the NOAA Corps was going to go away, and it was time for me to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I was like, oh. So I met with a coach, and she, we did a lot of stuff, those personality tests and strength tests and things like that. But I have since then been getting her quarterly newsletter about leadership. And just like 2 weeks ago, she sent this about training, where you would train to understand personal and professional stressors and then work to get beyond them, which is essentially resilience, right? And so the training had this acronym, which I shamelessly stole, but and this cute little picture. But all of these things are important, and they tie back to that slide where we talk about what you do to make yourself more resilient, and how that helps. Awareness, that's the key, right? You start with the awareness. Rest, support from others, exercise, nutrition, that's the health, attitude, and learning. So it's a good way to remember, so feel free to use that arsenal. And then I think there's one more slide, the wrap-up slide. All right, So I like to think of resilience as an immune system for your attitude. The more you have, the better you feel, and the quicker you can return to normal. So as we tie it to the vaccines of COVID, you know, maybe find out what you need, what shot in the arm you need to stay well, or to allow yourself to be not well but recover and get well. And I heard this a lot just in that last presentation too. You know, the parting words were a lot about be patient, go easy on yourself, take care of yourself, right? And so it's important, be patient with yourself, with each other, and with the process. It's really critical to do that, and patience is key. It's okay to be that orange on occasion, right? You want to be bruised and otherwise unchanged. You should avoid being the Christmas ornament, and you can strive to be the rubber ball and bounce back. And then my favorite wrap up is always be kind to yourself and all those that are entrusted to your care. So with that, I will take any questions or comments. There's one more slide, I believe, that has all of the resources, if anybody wants to link on them.
Thank you so much, Captain Lynch. Yeah, if anybody has questions, please go ahead and feel free to put them in the chat. I think the point in your presentation that stuck with me is that we don't have to make being resilient into a chore. We can take baby steps. We don't have to do all the resilient things at once.
Right.
Which I know, the last panel talked about, the 110 percenters, and, sometimes folks feel like, okay, to make this successful, I have to make big changes. I have to do all the things, the most that I possibly can. So I think that's a good thing to remember.
It's true. Yep. Just try something. And sometimes it doesn't take much, it's amazing. Just a slight change of attitude can sort of help, or a short walk where you're not thinking directly about things, but allowing them to marinate in your mind. Any other questions or thoughts that you guys have had a long day of these, but they're all very good. What do you like to do? I'm sorry, Winston, I'll have to read that again. What do you like to do on days when you're feeling off? Well, funny you should ask, Winston. Wait, off or on? So yesterday I was not feeling, it was just a busy day, and it was frustrating. And but I was looking forward to this, and I knew that this would make me feel better. So. And actually, the emotional intelligence training made me feel better just to think about something different other than my day-to-day work. So that's I think that's, what I discovered is the reaching out to folks really helps. And, I don't know, to-do lists help me because I can scratch them off. But puzzles are the ones that seem to make that my husband realizes make me calmer, and I think that's important. What about you, Winston? What do you like to do? Besides
Gosh,
paint?
I got a million things. I think on days when I'm feeling off, some people in my network and friends and my therapist have told me that the biggest thing to do is kind of greet that emotion and recognize it and allow it. I think our natural instinct is to reject it and say, oh, well, I can't afford to be having off day. I can't afford to feel kind of maybe a little bit depressed or anxious today. I have to artificially, pump myself up. And in reality, I think that there are some days that I've had incredibly productive days when I've felt at my lowest. And so, kind of to recognize that and push back a little bit on that instinct, I think.
That's good. Yeah, that was brought up yesterday in the emotional intelligence training too. That self-awareness, it's being able to name that emotion and meet it head on. And it was interesting because the instructor brought up how not everybody, you're not supposed to use those generalizations, but many times the emotion that gets named is anger. And that just stresses people out more. But if you really peel that back and find out, not every emotion is anger. Some emotions certainly are anger, but frustration can look a lot like that. Exhaustion, disappointment, all of those, and just to find those right words to describe exactly what you're feeling can not only help you, recognize it and face it, as you were just saying, Winston, but it can also help you, what do I need to do to fix it, right? I'm overwhelmed. I mean, that's how I felt yesterday. People, I think I had 3 texts. People asked me how I was. I told each one of them I was overwhelmed. But one of the best ways to get out from being overwhelmed is making a list and ticking off the things you can and filing away the things you can't until you can, and just having a little more control over things. So I think that's a really important point. Thank you for bringing it up. Anybody else? Well, again, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk and do something outside of my regular day-to-day job, because I find this very fulfilling. And I think, kudos to Mark and to Janet and all of you guys who put this on today. I hope that everybody is enjoying it. I'm sorry I couldn't spend all day with you, but certainly the presentations I did listen to were spot on, and it's always good to take tidbits away. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us, Captain Lynch. We appreciate you taking time to be part of our wellness event.